Well, we've been speaking of journalism, baseball journalists, and again, we've talked about Bruce Levine, breaking news. Well, he broke a doozy this past weekend. Not necessarily news, but speculation, I think, more than anything, when he reported that none other than Jose Abreu, apparent free agent to be, might be on the top, near the top of the Cubs to-do list. The previous episode of In the Hole, we went over all the to-do lists for each of our teams. I put on top of my list a bunch of free agent signings, which I'll get to in a bit again. But Jose Abreu is not amongst the top of my free agent targets for the Cubs. But Bruce Levine is reporting that it is amongst, or he is high on the list, I guess is how he put it. My initial thought when I heard that, I think it was either it came out on Friday or it came out Saturday morning just before he started his weekly radio show in the clubhouse on the Score. Saturday mornings, one of my favorite shows, actually, even though I get annoyed with Bruce Levine, but it's such a great Chicago baseball show, but also a national baseball show in a lot of ways. 52 weeks of the year, even throughout the hot stove season, get a really good 2 or 3 hour baseball show every week, every Saturday morning. But my first thought when you started saying that Abreu might come to the north side is just pure clickbait. It is the quintessential article that Chicago baseball writers can always write, talking about a player going from one side of town to the other side of town, whether it's a free agent move or a trade or whatever. It's such an easy thing for any Chicago baseball writer to do, just to get a ton of clicks and a ton of attention from both sides of town. You involve both teams in something that would interest both sides dramatically. So that was my first thought. But the more I thought about it, and he explained it quite a bit on his show, of course, there is a grain of truth or a grain of credulity to it, or it does sort of make sense when you think about what we've heard from the Cubs and where we think the Cubs are, and also where the Sox are. And I first want to start out with this, with maybe your perception of the Sox side of this. There's nothing that says that Abreu can't re-sign with the White Sox. I don't see that happening. I don't see a whole lot out there that says he will. And in fact, you've really seen a lot of things that point that he won't be back, including he didn't play on the final day of the season, specifically because he doesn't like goodbyes, I think was his quote.
Yeah,
he released a statement. So it's essentially saying he's leaving. I mean, we could talk about how kind of weird that is that he didn't give the crowd their goodbye. It's kind of selfish.
Yeah,
there's a lot of consternation over that. Doesn't show a lot of leadership necessarily of a guy who's famed to be such a leader. It's just kind of an odd situation where he didn't even play. But I don't know you're on record that it would be insane. I think your quote was, "It'd be fucking stupid if the White Sox re-signed him next year just because of the log jam at first base and everything else going on."
You have we're crossing the streams, and in Ghostbusters is bad, but here it's good for the White Sox because you are going to be able to take the person who's trending up in Andrew Vaughn, who's matched Jose Abreu's declining numbers this year, even though he still had a decent batting average, but his power numbers were down and everything.
Okay, that's interesting because his WAR is actually up over last year. He was 3, and now he's 4.2. So that's interesting that, and then I'm bringing up WAR, but that's unfair to Vaughn specifically because he was playing out of position, and his WAR has been dragged below 0 actually because of his poor defense in right field. But moving him to first base would mitigate, and if not completely obliterate any kind of negative WAR he would have at that point. So,
and you take the mental, and I got to believe, for a lot of these guys at times it's mentally straining to be playing out of position and somewhat worried,
And Vaughn ran out of gas in each of the last 2 seasons. His numbers dropped in both August and September.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a direct result of playing out of position. The mental taxation on his brain, trying to learn Learn a position he's just never going to be good at, trying to be proficient at. Throw him at first base, and I think it's fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see what he does. So yeah, I agree with you. I just disagree with you that Abreu is necessarily declining as rapidly as you suggest.
Well, the WAR's up because of his batting average and the amount of singles he got this year. He was second in the league in hits.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. Except if your job is to hit home runs and drive runners in. If he's going to be,
I think he drives in. What was his RBI?
70 something.
Okay.
So
I got to be honest. I have no idea how WAR is calculated. So if you might know more than me, but I'll believe you there.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically him against the rest of the league. So is it not?
Well, like, no, I mean all the different statistical categories. Yeah. How defense is interpreted, how all of that is interpreted. I have no idea.
Yeah,
so.
And he was often criticized at the beginning of his career about poor defense, but overall he's a pretty decent first baseman. Like he doesn't make a lot of bonehead plays. Yes, does he occasionally? Sure, but
he doesn't make the spectacular play a whole lot. I wouldn't. I'd call him a average to below average, maybe. And that's certainly going to trend further south, but
you got the DH too, on
exactly
both leagues. So
he is on record though saying he's not interested in DHing. That, of course, that's going to change as he ages. He's 36 at this point that we know of. I think that's his listed age. We're never sure about that, but I guess from a Cubs perspective, I was thinking about this, and there is some sense to it, mainly that the Cubs could possibly be interested in a free agent first baseman, not specifically Abreu necessarily. He might fit that bill, but and this is getting into a larger conversation about the Cubs in this offseason and what they've been doing over the last 3 years that has driven me crazy, that has turned me against Tom Ricketts in many ways. How they have chosen to rebuild a team that was supposed to not ever have to rebuild again. A team that has started their own television network, making the people of Illinois and Chicago pay for the privilege of viewing their Cubs and lining the pockets of Cubs ownership while they chose not to spend on what could have been playoff contenders over these years. And we've debated the merits of that or lack thereof over and over again. But the fact is, the Ricketts family has chosen not to spend money over the last couple of years, being in the third largest market, team that just rolls in revenue constantly. But we've heard plenty of propaganda, however, over the last couple of weeks from both the president of the Cubs, Jed Hoyer, as well as directly from Tom Ricketts in a direct letter to Cubs fans that I received as I'm on their mailing list, that says they are now in a position to spend money. They will be aggressive in the free agent market. And it's like, no shit. You could have been doing this for the last 3 years, but you chose not to. So it's about fucking time, I guess is my main point. So I'm not surprised by this. This is also well timed as season ticket sales for 2023 have begun, trying to generate interest in selling those tickets, as clearly attendance is down. It's not in terrible shape as a lot as we saw in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with the Cubs. They'll never be what that was, but the attendance has been down, and I think the Cubs are now in a PR/propaganda move to get people to go to games, to subscribe to the Marquee Network, to get those revenue streams going once again at full tilt. Best way to do that is to put a fucking contender on the field. The fastest way to do that is, I will give them credit, building the farm system to the point where you can supplement that young talent that we're starting to see develop with top name free agents. And that is the ultimate goal, to have a team that has the strongest farm system and has more money than anybody and can buy anybody they need to supplement their few weaknesses. And That's the goal. That's always been the goal. The farm system suffered dramatically near the end of the Theo regime. Thus, if you buy everything that Jed Hoyer and Tom Ricketts have told you over the last 3 years, that necessitated the sell-off of all their golden era talent. And it has had some returns. The Cubs have had one of the best rotations in baseball over the second half of this past season, which is kind of unbelievable to think of. They had the best record in the major leagues from September 12th on.
It sounds like you talking about the Tigers last year.
Yeah, I know. That's a small sample size. It's selling hope. I'm just putting facts out there for now, but I guess it does make sense, since a major hole in what one of the major holes the Cubs still have all over the place includes first base, as we saw the sad ending of Frank Schwindel and the Chicago Cubs. It is no longer the Schwindy City, as he flamed out last year. There is no immediate fill-in at first base, although some will point to Matt Mervis, which I'm not sure you've ever heard of him. Not many have, other than those have been scouring the Cubs farm system, and especially this year, as he led the minor leagues in RBI, and I think it was third in home runs. 1,000 OPS over his time between high A, double A, and all the way up to triple A Iowa. Pretty much the best hitter in minor league baseball this year, but he's done it for 1 year.
Yeah.
24-year-old, some will say, oh yeah, just put him at first base. Well, he's never played in the major leagues. That's a great thing to have in your system. That is not something you could rely on if indeed the Cubs are, I'm kind of putting words in their mouth, but if they're all in on spending and supplementing their roster with free agents, I don't think you're building a contending club with a unproven rookie, even as great as his numbers were in the minors this past year. So that's another reason why a first base free agent might make a lot of sense. And in this particular case, Abreu could make some sense. If you could sign him to a short-term deal, I don't see how he couldn't help. Part of Abreu's value is that he's always there. He always plays. He is never hurt, essentially. I think he's averaged. The stat I heard today, I was listening to the White Sox Talk podcast, NBC Sports, Chicago. I got to remember this right. He's averaged 141 games a year over the last 7 years, I think it was. That includes the 60-game shortened season. So that's artificially dropping that average. So he'd be in like around 150, 155 games average every year. So he's always there.
Yeah, I think that's really his average, because he played 157 this year.
Yeah, so he's just always there. Again, I mentioned his WAR was 3 last year. It's 4.2 this year. He's not in decline. That could happen at any moment, of course. But even if it was, I think the Cubs would be in a good position to at least utilize what production he has left. Again, you said that the DH could be a possibility, even though Abreu has said that he's not really interested in that. But his attitude is going to have to change about that if he wants to remain a major leaguer. And he did say that. He had part of his statement at the end of this year is he's still interested in playing baseball. There was some speculation before the year that, he kind of made it sound like this was his last year in baseball, but he kind of made it sound like it may have been his last year with the White Sox. So it was just kind of nebulous. That seems to be kind of solidifying in that he's not retiring. He's just either doesn't want to or can't, is not going to have a place with the White Sox. So I've initially thought Bruce was just looking for some clickbait. The more you really look at it, there is some plausibility. I think Bruce's case is better served if he just said the Cubs are looking at a first base free agent. It doesn't necessarily have to be Abreu. There are others out there. I think that part makes sense. Abreu makes some sense on a few levels, but more than anything, I think it's just a fantastic headline. So much fun for Chicago baseball fans on both sides to talk about, whether they're excited or be really annoyed, considering I mean, the legacy of Jose Abreu is going to be he's literally one of the greatest White Sox of all time when it comes down to it. He doesn't have a championship under his belt, but few do. But he is in the pantheon of certainly amongst your best first basemen ever. It's kind of amazing what you've had at first base over these years. It literally went from Frank Thomas for all those years to Paul Konerko for those years, and now to Jose Abreu. So it's going to be interesting to see how his legacy is viewed. If he did somehow make it to the Cubs, would that be tarnished? Would White Sox fans hold that against him?
Fuck White Sox fans. I mean, Jesus.
I mean, I've heard a lot of people say he's one of their favorite players of all time. Yeah, so I can't. Yeah, I hope that's not the case.
I replied to you joking around that it'd be a dick move by the Cubs to sign him, but like, good for him. Go to the Cubs.
All's fair in love and baseball. But
I'd actually love him to stay in Chicago so I could see him play more on a consistent basis. And
that's another interesting point.
Get him out of the AL.
Would he be the most, if he had a successful time, even if it's a short time with the Cubs, would he be the most beloved baseball player in Chicago history because he had positive things on both sides of town? I mean, that's a legacy. That's a rare legacy. I mean,
it would be a rare. You're right. It'd be a rare legacy because normally what happened is you had it when there have been those trades. It's been good one way and bad the other way.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing. This wouldn't be a trade. This would be a choice by the player. You talked about Sammy Sosa, of course, and Ron Santo, and those were all trades. Any of of course, the trade that shall never be named, the Jose Quintana and Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease and all that. Those were not those players' choices. This would be a choice by a player, but I think like you said, it'd be really sour grapes and really unfortunate if White Sox fans turned against him in his viewing his legacy. But
I mean, they are in a way, because I mean, I know he didn't have the legacy, but everyone loved Nicky Two Strikes, and the minute he got traded, that
they turned on him.
They turned on him, and I would always remember getting into it. I'd be like, "What is wrong with you? Like,
he didn't do anything wrong.
What do you hate Nick Madrigal?" And he's oh, blah, blah. Look, Nick's at it again. Another error. I'm like, well, he's probably still dusting off the bad fielding coaching he got from the South Side,
Yeah.
Jesus. And he's a young player. That's the other thing. That's the thing about, and I've just said it over and over again this year. The frustrating thing about looking at fans' comments is, get rid of Gavin Sheets and do this and do that. It's like the dude's barely played baseball on a professional and in the majors. And putting numbers in perspective of where Jose Abreu was, that, he's consistently for the White Sox been a 30 home run, 100 RBI guy this year. This year he was 15-75, but with 183 hits.
Yeah.
And the most walks in his career at 62. Now, putting that in perspective, that was on over 157 games. In 84 games, Eloy Jimenez had one more home run at 16 and 54 RBIs. So,
yeah.
Andrew Vaughn, who will get more playing time without Jose Abreu there, had 70 in 134 games, had 17 home runs and 76 RBIs. So, the case for the White Sox is there really isn't room for Jose Abreu on the team anymore.
I agree.
So
it's crazy to say on the surface, but it's obvious if you dig deeper and look at what's really happening with that roster construction. It doesn't make sense anymore.
So anyway,
could be the end of an era. Could be the beginning of a new era. The only thing I would say to that is, according to Bruce Levine's reporting, is that he's high on the list of Cubs free agent targets. He better be behind Trey Turner and Jacob deGrom or one of those guys. I'll be fine with that.
Jose, but I agree. Yes.
I'll be fine if Jose is third, fourth, fifth on that list, somewhere in there. If they're really going for it and going to use their financial might to actually try to compete finally since 2020. I wouldn't be against Jose Abreu by any means. I just wouldn't want him to be their top target. If they think they're building around him, he can supplement what a larger plan might be, but he can't be the center of that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a nice.
For the same reason he can't be the center of what's going forward with the White Sox.
Yeah.
Same idea. So
yeah, he's a nice addition for the for the Cubs with a young team. He brings a veteran presence there, and a hell of a work ethic. For those younger players to look at. So good luck to him. I hope he ends up in town still.
Word Hole Media.